Okay, so you guys have sent over a wild amount of stuff on Diddy. Seriously, breaking news. We've got court documents, articles, everything, and we are diving deep into his recent arrest. Let me tell you, this one's got some twists and turns even I wasn't expecting.
It's interesting, right? Because this goes way beyond your typical, celebrity run-in with the law. We're looking at accusations, like serious ones. Sex trafficking, we're talking racketeering even. It suggests a much bigger, darker picture than just a one-time thing.
And the timing is crazy. Remember that whole incident back in 2016 at that hotel with Cassie Ventura? Turns out that might just be the tip of the iceberg here. We're looking at articles you sent that detail a wave of lawsuits against Diddy. 9. 9 of them are alleging sexual assault alone.
Yeah, and you got to think that 2016 case on top of that New York law that changed, that Adult Survivors Act, that really opened things up, gave a voice to a lot of people who maybe before that wouldn't or couldn't come forward.
We've got live reports from CNN, The Star, you name it. Diddy got arrested September 16th at, get this, a fancy Manhattan hotel. So much for laying low, huh? And the wild part is, back in March, they already raided his homes. Homeland Security's been on this for a while now.
It really seems like the authorities have been building a case, piece by piece. And those charges are nothing to scoff at. Racketeering. That carries a life sentence, potentially. Think of it like, imagine a mob boss using all his businesses, his connections, for illegal stuff. That's racketeering. Now picture that, but in the music industry. Someone with Diddy's power. That's a whole different ballgame.
Oh, and it gets even wilder. One lawsuit, this one from a videographer who worked with him, claims Diddy was drugging guests at parties. Then there's they called them freakouts, these recorded sexual
Performances.
yeah, performances that he allegedly used to control women. And get this, they're saying when Diddy, didn't get his way, things could get violent, like women ending up injured, needing weeks to recover.
It's scary to think about, honestly. That kind of power, especially in an industry like music, where, let's face it, the lines can get blurred. The prosecution wants us to see this pattern of someone used to getting what he wants, no matter the cost. And that this wasn't just random incidents, but something built into how he operated, helped by his money and the people around him.
Speaking of, even Diddy's own son, Christian, is facing accusations now. One of these lawsuits claims he assaulted a crew member on a yacht. This isn't just touching Diddy, it's affecting everyone close to him.
It really highlights how far-reaching the consequences can be with these types of allegations. And even though Diddy's saying he's innocent, this is just the beginning. The evidence, the number of people willing to come forward now, it's going to be big.
So we've got the charges, the timeline, this whole massive case. But what about Diddy himself? How's he responding to all this? What's his play here?
Well, it's pretty different from how he handled things back in 2016, that's for sure. Remember how he owned up to that hotel incident? Apologized, called it inexcusable. Now he and his lawyer are saying this whole thing is bogus, that he's being targeted unfairly. They're pushing this image of him as a good guy, a family man, trying to make people sympathize with him.
So maybe he learned from last time, right? Back then, that video, that evidence forced his hand. Now, with these accusations going way back, relying more on what people say happened, he's going on the offensive.
Exactly. And his team's going all out. They're talking about all the good he's done, especially for the black community. They're making sure everyone knows he's a dad, a successful businessman. Anything to make him seem relatable, the opposite of how the prosecution's painting him.
But will it work? Things are different now than in 2016. The hashtag #MeToo movement changed things, made it harder to just apologize your way out of this kind of stuff.
For sure. Public opinion is way less forgiving now. And as big as Diddy is, as much as people know him, the number of accusations and how serious they are, that's a tough thing to overcome.
Yeah.
Even for him.
And let's not forget, this isn't just about Diddy anymore. This indictment names people who worked with him, even staff, saying they helped him control and silence women.
That's a really crucial part of all this. It's not just him, it's this system they're alleging, this culture of fear that let this go on for years.
We're talking high-level employees, assistants, even household staff. They're accused of everything from watching the women to helping cover up assaults.
It's disturbing to think about. Imagine being in that situation, feeling trapped, knowing even the people around you are in on it. That's the kind of power dynamic that can get really messed up, especially in places like the music industry.
Okay, so we've got the charges, the possible sentences, how Diddy's fighting back. But what about the actual proof? What are they using to build this case?
Well, besides people actually testifying, which seems like a big part of their plan, they've got some physical evidence, too. Remember those raids on his places back in March?
Oh, yeah.
The Star reported they found a ton of lubricant, like over 1,000 bottles, along with guns and ammunition.
1,000. What? How does that even, how does that connect to the charges?
It's about the bigger picture. It's like that alone might not mean much, but add it to everything else. The stories about the drugs, the forced encounters, the violence, it starts to make you think twice about the image Diddy's team is trying to sell.
So it's like a puzzle then. Each piece might not be much on its own, but together.
Exactly. And don't forget that New York law, even though we don't know how many of these accusations are directly because of it, it definitely made people feel safer about speaking out.
Which brings up a bigger point. If this is all true, if they find Diddy guilty, this could change everything. Not just for him, but for the whole music industry.
It would be huge. People have been talking about these problems for years, but this could force everyone to finally face them.
It's like we're watching two things happen at once, right? You've got the legal battle, all the evidence and strategy, but then there's the bigger conversation this is creating.
And that conversation is just as important. It's about believing the people who say they're victims, holding powerful people accountable, making it so this can't happen anymore.
So where do we even go from here? We've looked at the charges, how Diddy's responding, the evidence, but with something this complicated, this big, it's hard to know what's next.
You're telling me. But one thing's for sure, this is far from over. We've still got questions, and who knows what's going to come out in the next few months.
Will they find him guilty on everything? Will his defense work? And what about the music industry? This could change it all.
Big questions, for sure. But as we wait for the next chapter of this whole crazy story, it's important to remember this isn't just about Diddy. This is about a system that protects powerful people and silences the vulnerable.
A system that's long overdue for a change, don't you think?
It's wild, right? Like back in 2016 with that hotel thing, he took responsibility, even said his behavior was inexcusable. But now, it's all unjust prosecution, and I'm the victim here.
He's playing a different game now. Maybe that video back then that forced his hand, now it's all about what people say happened, so he's coming out swinging.
Yeah, and his legal team is going hard. They're bringing up all the good he's done, especially in the black community.
Yeah.
Trying to make him seem relatable. Like, hey, he's a good guy, a dad, a businessman. The opposite of what the other side's saying.
But is that going to work? Especially now, after #MeToo. It's not so easy for powerful people to just apologize their way out of things anymore.
Absolutely. The public doesn't forget so easily these days. And even for someone as big as Diddy, that many accusations, that serious, that's a lot to come back from.
And we can't forget, this isn't just about him anymore, right? This indictment says people who worked for him, they were involved too, helping him control and silence these women.
That's a huge part of this. It's like they're saying it was a whole system, this culture, where people were afraid to speak up. That's how it went on for so long.
We're talking people high up in his company's assistants, even the staff at his homes. They're saying these people were watching the women, even helping cover up assaults.
It's really messed up when you think about it. To be in that situation, feeling like you have nowhere to turn, like everyone's in on it, especially in an industry like music, that kind of power dynamic can be so toxic.
So we've talked about the charges, what could happen to him, how he's fighting back. But what about the actual evidence? What are they using to build this case?
Besides people actually testifying, which sounds like it'll be a big part of it, there's that physical evidence from those raids back in March.
Right.
Well, the Star said they found over 1,000 bottles of lubricant, along with guns and ammunition.
Wait, 1,000? Seriously? What does that have to do with anything?
It's about the bigger picture they're painting. That alone, maybe not so much, but add it to everything else. The stories about drugs, women being forced into things, the violence, it doesn't exactly match the image Diddy's team wants us to believe, right?
So it's like they're putting together a puzzle then.
Yeah.
All these different pieces, they might not be much on their own.
Exactly. And don't forget about that New York law that changed things. Even if we don't know how many of these women are coming forward because of it, it definitely made a difference. They might not have felt safe speaking up before.
Which makes you think, if this is all true and Diddy's found guilty, this could be massive, not just for him, but for the whole music industry.
Oh, absolutely. People have been whispering about these issues forever, but this could force everyone to finally face them head on.
It's almost like there are two things happening at once, isn't it? There's the legal case, all the lawyers and evidence, but then there's this whole other conversation happening at the same time about so much more.
And that conversation is so important. It's about actually believing the people who say they were hurt and holding powerful people responsible for their actions. It's about making sure this stops happening.
Okay, so where do we even go from here? We've talked about the charges, how Diddy's responding, the evidence, but honestly, with something this big and complex, it's impossible to know what's going to happen next.
You're telling me this thing is far from over? There are still so many unanswered questions, and who knows what else is going to come out as the case moves forward.
Will they find him guilty of everything? Will his defense work? And what about the music industry as a whole? This could change everything.
Big, big questions. But while we wait to see what happens next, it's important to remember this is about a lot more than just Diddy. It's about power and how it's used. It's about a system that often protects the people at the top while silencing the ones who are most vulnerable.
It's about time for that system to change, don't you think? It's kind of surreal, right? This whole industry, music, I mean, it's all about glamour and parties and, living the good life. But now we're seeing this whole other side. And Diddy, he was at the top. Now he might lose it all.
It definitely makes you think. Money, fame, none of that matters when you're facing the law. And whether or not he's actually guilty, just the fact that these accusations exist, that the feds are investigating him, it changes how people see him, maybe forever.
We've been talking about the charges, the evidence, what this all means for Diddy and everyone around him. But it's easy to forget this isn't just some big story. These accusations, they involve real people, real women who say they were hurt.
That's so important to remember. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines, the celebrity gossip aspect of it all. But at the end of the day, we're talking about real pain, real trauma, and someone needs to be held accountable for that.
It takes a lot of guts to come forward with these kinds of accusations, especially against someone as powerful as Diddy. It makes you wonder how many other people are out there, people who maybe haven't felt safe enough to speak up yet.
It's a reminder that this stuff happens everywhere, not just in Hollywood or the music industry. It's about power and how some people use it to hurt others. We have to listen to these stories, believe them, and actually do something about it.
So we started this whole thing with a mountain of stuff, right? Articles, legal documents, people telling their stories. And it all adds up to something pretty messy, pretty complicated. We've looked at the charges, the evidence, what this all means for Diddy.
And it's true. We may never know exactly what happened. But one thing's for sure. This is far from over. This case, this whole conversation has started. It's going to be with us for a long time.
It makes you think about image versus reality, like who someone is in public versus who they are behind closed doors. And how much are we willing to accept that? What kind of example are we setting for everyone watching?
Big questions, no easy answers. But one thing's for sure. Staying silent isn't an option anymore. We have to keep talking, keep listening, and keep pushing for change.